Hello everyone and welcome back to Sporting Memories Answers. And this weekend's one's been quite interesting because we've had a look at the theme of Stoptober, or Go Sober for October. So the relationship of smoking, drinking in sport and how that's changed. So I hope you enjoyed the questions and maybe you've been having a bit of a route round to find out who was who in the questions. So I'm going to reveal the answers now, and then I'm going to just chat a little bit about individuals where I can, and hopefully that'll bring up a few more memories as well. So number one, we just began by asking you which footballer from the mid-60s featured in an advert to boost the profile of the Great British Pub. Well, that was, at the time, you couldn't be more famous than this individual. It was, of course, Bobby Moore, the World Cup captain. And in the advert, if you've watched it, you'll have noticed he wasn't alone. He was with his teammate from West Ham, Martin Peters. And the two of them basically arrived at the pub, all suited up and ready for a night out. And yeah, it was quite a nice advert, quite dated, obviously. So Bobby Moore, of course, with West Ham from 1958 to 1974. And then moving to Fulham from 1974 to 77. He tragically died back in 1993 at the very young age of 51 after bouts of cancer. He earned 108 caps, one of the greatest defenders for England. And as I said, Martin Peters featured in the advert alongside. So Bobby Moore, and if you put down Martin Peters, then you're a star. And if you got both of them, what can I say? You should give yourself an extra point. So Bobby Moore with Martin Peters. That's question number one. Number two, in his book, Back from the Brink, which former Manchester United player tells the story of a career that was almost ended by alcohol consumption? So we were looking, some of you might have thought straight away of George Best, but it wasn't George Best. It was, of course, the legendary Paul McGrath. So all you Villa fans out there would have known it was Paul McGrath. Paul was with Manchester United from 1982 to 1989 before a big move to Villa, where he stayed till 96. Struggled with drinking, managed to control it, and he always had a lot of trouble, didn't he, if you remember, with his knees. Particularly later in his career, he really had a big problem with a type of arthritis. But, saying that, he still made 253 appearances for Villa, 163 for Man U, and he was capped by the Republic of Ireland 83 times. So I'd say that's a pretty successful career. So number two, Paul McGrath. And of course, he wasn't the only player who struggled with drinking. There's been so many of them. So I didn't want to just go to the ones you'd assume and look at some different ones. So that's two. Number three, which cigarette brand had a well-known association with the Lotus Formula One team with their famous gold and black livery? And it was, of course, John Player Special. And here we have a little visual aid to go with it. Here's the lovely John Player Special sponsored Lotus Formula One car. And I got this, I reckon, probably when I was about 7 or 8. And I know what you're thinking. You've looked after it very well. I always really liked it. It was really something special on my sideboard. And famous drivers, I should imagine the one we're probably thinking of there is Emerson Fittipaldi, the Brazilian driver, Formula One champion in 72 and 74 for Lotus, which is probably not long after when this model came out in recognition of that. So that's number three, John Player Special. Number four, who was the primary sponsor of the World Snooker Championships from 76 to 05 until the UK government banned tobacco sponsorship? And it was the Embassy. Embassy was the cigarette company. And we used to all trot it out, didn't we? We used to all say, oh, it'll soon be the World Embassy Snooker. So the word embassy actually became part of saying World Snooker. You didn't really miss it out. World Embassy Snooker. And that's how subtle, I think, the sponsorship became. It became so part and parcel, you didn't really think twice about it. But that went on for many years, of course, since they arrived in the Crucible till 2005. The irony, I suppose, nowadays is that a lot of the sponsorship has moved from smoking and drinking to betting, like Betfred and things like that. So, number 5. Why was the advert of Eric Cantona showing him advertising Kronenborg 1664 banned? Well, the reason was, if you've watched the advert, Eric Cantona's talking about France all of the time. Its origins are in France, the people of France, and it's making you believe that this beer is brewed in France, and it isn't. It's brewed in the UK, mostly in the Manchester area. So the watchdog was saying that's a false account because the consumer is believing the Kronenborg they're going to drink was brewed in France, when of course I think it's actually been overruled recently and it can go ahead. And of course Kronenborg itself has sponsored different sporting events over the years, even the Tour de France. At one point it had some sponsorship in there. So that's number 5, because of its references to being brewed in France when it was actually, and still is, brewed in the UK. Number 6, which footballer began advertising the Craven A cigarettes in the 50s under the slogan, "It's the cigarette for me," even though he didn't even smoke? And this is the great, legendary Sir Stanley Matthews. That's right. Sir Stanley Matthews, even though he didn't smoke, it was very much seen as part and parcel of what you did. And it was about that time, or maybe a bit earlier, where cigarette companies began putting into their packets little collectible cards of sporting icons, particularly. So it really drew people into purchasing them and to gain brand loyalty, because you wanted to collect the set. And I got loads of sets where with my nana and granddad, they had loads and loads of these packets of cigarette cards. They were incredible, because everybody was smoking, weren't they? So Stanley Matthews, of course, who was at Stoke from 1932 to 47, and at Blackpool from 47 till 61. So still playing in his 50s. So it just shows that not being a smoker enabled him to carry on a lot longer, because his arteries were a lot more protected. He stayed a lot fitter. So the legendary Stanley Matthews advertised smoking but didn't smoke. Now, number 7. Which former Arsenal legend served 58 days in Chelmsford prison following a 1990 conviction for drink driving? And this, of course, is Tony Adams. Tony Adams, pretty much one club player, wasn't he? A 22-year career at Arsenal, 4 titles, 3 FA Cups, and he was the captain for 14 years. That's pretty impressive, isn't it? From 1983 to 2002, and also 66 caps for England, 87 to 2000. So, of course, Tony Adams was still there in the old Division 1 years and in the Premiership years as well. So that's Tony Adams, and I'm sure you can name other players who were jailed. There's a few I'm thinking of as well, alongside Tony Adams, but he's often the one people think about. The other main one I'm thinking of is Duncan Ferguson, Jan Molby of Liverpool, of course, but his was reckless driving. I don't know if it was linked to drink driving or not. So there's been a few. There's been a few over the years. So that's number 7, Tony Adams. Number 8, which Dutch footballing star used to smoke 26 cigarettes a day, was only forced to give up after he underwent double heart bypass surgery? And this was the one and only Johan Cruyff. Johan Cruyff, the player who kind of was behind this Dutch total football. Do you remember that concept? The Cruyff turn. So Cruyff played for Ajax of Amsterdam from 64 to 73. Then he headed off to Barcelona from 73 to 78. And he was a Holland international from 66 to 77. So well-known player. He also did a health campaign at the time saying, football has given me everything and smoking nearly took it all away. So he was fortunate with his bypass surgery. He did go on, with reasonable quality of life after that, finally succumbing to, I think it was cancer in the end. So Johan Cruyff, even though he was such a top footballer, smoking 20 cigarettes a day, even as fit as he was, even he succumbed to his coronary arteries getting completely furred up and nearly causing him to die of a heart attack, of course. So number 8, Johan Cruyff. Number 9, which cycling world champion had sizable amounts of brandy and amphetamines in his system when he collapsed from his bike live on TV when he was almost at the summit of Mont Ventoux during the 1967 Tour de France? And it was, Tom Simpson. 29 years of age at the time. He was an accomplished cyclist. He'd won many of the spring classics. He'd won staging the Vuelta. And a tragedy that he died in the heat of Ventoux with all those stimulants in his body. Very sad. And it's sad, isn't it, that when he came off his bike, the quote was, "Put me back on my bike." So that's number 9. Number 10, which cigarette company sponsored the Masters in snooker from 75 till 03? And the answer to this one is Benson and Hedges. We used to roll off the tongue, didn't it? Benson and Hedges Masters, in the same way as you'd say Embassy World Snooker. The Masters, which is one of the snooker Triple Crown events. Kirk Stevens was the first player to gain a maximum break at the Masters in 1984. John Spencer was one of the first ones to win the Masters, beating a Ray Reardon. And more recently, 2019, Trump beat O'Sullivan to take the coveted title. So that is the Masters, sponsored by Benson and Hedges. Number 11, sure you've got this one. Which Formula One former world champion was well known for his round-the-clock booze, consumption and playboy lifestyle? I was looking for James Hunt. Formula One champion in 1976, who went on to have that great rivalry with Niki Lauda. And Hunt, once he'd won it, it seemed to sort of die away, that passion for the sport. He commentated for a while, didn't he? And he tragically died at the very young age of 45 from a heart attack, which you could probably argue was linked to the lifestyle he led of excessive drinking, smoking, not just cigarettes, but other drugs, etc. as well. But obviously his sporting prowess as a driver was phenomenal. So that's number 11, James Hunt. Number 12, which former football star once said, "I spent 90% of my money on women, drinking, fast cars, the rest of it, I just wasted it." And this one it's George Best, isn't it, from Manchester United. So George Best played from 63 till 74 at Man United, 361 appearances, 137 goals, an international with Northern Ireland from 64 till 77, and the winner of the coveted Ballon d'Or in 1968, which was, of course, the year when he helped Manchester United to win the coveted European Cup. So, a great player whose time, I think, was cut short in football because of his addiction to alcohol, unfortunately. Number 13. Which team in Formula One did Marlboro Cigarette Company sponsor? Which was the team that Marlboro sponsored? And the answer we were looking for was McLaren, wasn't it? Can you remember that red and white livery? It was McLaren, who dominated Formula One for much of the 80s and 90s, well, the early 90s, with people like Lauda, Prost and Senna as well, who all drove for McLaren. So Marlboro sponsored McLaren, so McLaren for number 13. Number 14, you probably got this one right. Which former Newcastle legend explained that 9 of our team smoked, and on 3 occasions at Wembley in a cup final, I've sat at half time having a fag? And that was the legendary Jackie Milburn. Jackie Milburn, who was playing from 43 till 57 at Newcastle, most of his career there. Like many footballers of his day, though, he did die of lung cancer. And he wasn't the only one, as I've said there. Many other footballers, less known than Jackie Milburn, also passed, tragically, from lung cancer as well. And another thing I was reading as well is that the clubs of his day, so Newcastle, high-profile club, were giving free packets of cigarettes to their players to help them relax, to help them play better, to concentrate better. Little did they know. But the link with cancers and other nasties was already coming out medically in the 50s and 60s. But of course it took a long time before people's attitudes started to change in sport. And saying that, of course, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of sports stars in football particularly are still smokers. And finally, number 15, an easy one to finish this one. Which sport is Guinness best known for sponsoring? Which sport? And of course, you know the answer, rugby. Rugby it is. They announced a new 6-year deal to become the title sponsor of the Six Nations. So it will be known as the Guinness Six Nations from 2019. And most people, when you think of Guinness, if you think of a sport, it's rugby, isn't it? And Guinness is an unusual one because it's not always had a bad reputation. Well, most beer hasn't. But Guinness, you don't have to go that many years. It was given to pregnant women for its iron content. It was also given, a lot of people don't realise this, to cardiac rehab patients. Up until the 1990s, if you went to any cardiac rehab ward in any general hospital, they would come out with a trolley most days, little can of Guinness that Guinness produced specifically for hospitals. The Guinness can was opened, poured out for the cardiac rehab patient, and then it was drunk. So it was a small amount. They weren't boozing on it, but what they were recognising is, are small amounts of alcohol, things like Guinness, red wine, etc., are they useful in that particular medical condition? So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say all alcohol is wrong in any amount. We could say that for cigarette smoking, of course, but we have to be careful in terms of drinking. Not that we're encouraging people to drink. So I hope you've enjoyed those 15 questions and how the attitudes have changed remarkably in terms of smoking and how companies look for brand loyalty by putting cards in packets, and football clubs gave free cigarettes away and they sponsored some big events, as did drinking companies, and how sports stars themselves often became addicted. Look at George Best, Paul McGrath, look at Johan Cruyff. As a professional footballer playing at the highest levels for his Dutch national team and Barcelona, he's smoking 20 a day. That seems quite strange, doesn't it, to our ears now? But that's what he was doing. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and it's given you a few interesting memories to think about as well. So till next time, bye-bye for now.